Hello and welcome to the Objective Music Report, the only source for objectively correct music criticism on the internet. I am your host, and today is not really a review of an album. It's actually more of a how-to video, or more of a. Lately, to back up, I've been thinking a lot about how you go about writing reviews. I'm still trying to get my footing in. I mean, I do have the objectively correct opinions on music itself, but obviously I don't have the objectively correct way to go about expressing those opinions. So I've been thinking a lot about how to give my opinion on these sorts of things. Now, I guess this is more of just a portrayal of my thoughts. This is a confusing video to make, and I've lost the first take of this video, and so I'm doing this again for the second time. Really annoying. But this is a confusing video to give because it's more just like a portrayal of my sort of thought process going in on how I'm writing my reviews in the future. I've been thinking a lot of different ways I could be doing reviews, and it's just sort of an analysis of that and looking at how to do it. So this is my final opinion. Sorry about the webcam; it's pretty low quality, and the microphone itself. 5 people just clicked off the video. I know that. Okay. So part 1. Little transition there. Do you include a score? So I've included as a little meme. I have like a little joke on every single slide. I've included Tool's Lateralis, the Pitchfork review of it, which was a pretty low review. And in retrospect, that album has been actually received very well. That was not a very poignant, it wasn't a super good prediction on the reviewer's part for Pitchfork there, that it was going to be reviled in the future, because it's actually pretty respected now in a lot of circles at this point, which I think is funny. But I guess the real question is, does including a score reduce art to a commodity? So, I mean, think of it this way. So usually a score makes sense if you're giving, if I'm reviewing a drill, it would make sense to give it a 3-star review or a 7.5 out of 10 or whatever. That would make sense because like a drill, like a tool or something like that, is going to have an objective. If I buy a drill, I have an objective that I want it to, screw screws and be able to unscrew screws, have good battery life, blah, blah, blah. They're objective measures as to how, you want to treat tools like that as, there's an objective thing you want a drill to do. There's an objective purpose behind these sorts of things. I mean, as objective as you can get. And people going to the review are definitely looking they don't want a drill that's not going to work. There's no merit to that sort of drill. But I mean, art isn't really the same way, because art isn't really objective. I mean, some art is going to be better than other art, but is it really wrong to represent that with a score? So if I think that Abbey Road is better than Revolver, is the best way to represent that opinion is that to say, oh, Abbey Road is a 9.5 and Revolver is an 8.5 or something like that? I think that the real those aren't real scores, by the way. Just make sure you're not objectively. We want to be spreading the objectively correct scores. I have objectively correct scores for those albums. Those are not those objective correct scores. But is it really? Do I really want to be giving a score to this record? Why don't I just say that I like this one better, and why don't I explain why I like it better? Why do I need to go through this extra step of saying that, oh, there's this one's better, and also there's this arbitrary number I'm putting on top of it to show that it's better? Obviously, that it seems there's something off about that. I mean, you can argue whether or not there is subjective or objective taste in music, or just in art in general. I mean, I would side on the side that there isn't an objective standard of aesthetics and beauty. But again, I am the Objective Music Report, so that would be contradicting my whole name and would ruin my entire bit. But I think to a further point, do numerical scores are they even coherent as a concept? Letter grades for certain categories, I think there's something that makes sense about saying, oh, this is an A album, or oh, this is a D tier album, or this is a B minus or whatever, blah blah blah. I think that there's something you can get from that, or you can say, oh, this is a good album, this is a terrible album, this is a horrible album, blah blah blah. But does the number, what is the number based off of? Is it a scale of how much? Is it 60% as good as a 10 out of 10 album? Is it half as good as is a 3 out of 10, half as good as a 6 out of 10? Is it a third? Yeah. It's confusing. What is the number? What is the number getting at? What is the number getting at? What is it deriving? And I think you really get to a more cognitive. I think there is a cognizant critique that you can make against the concept that you have numbers in general. I mean, obviously, the objective music report, so those critiques are going to be objectively wrong because I use numbers in my scores. But I think there's a serious point here to be considered. How do I make sense of a 6.5? So how much better if I say that Please Please Me the Beatles is a 6.4, and then I say A Hard Day's Night is a 6.5. Again, not objective review scores. Don't spread those and say they're my opinion. How much better am I saying A Hard Day's Night is? Like how did I make the distinction in my mind that one was a 6.5 and one was a 6.4? Like, was one just slightly better? And in what metric was it slightly better, you know? And how could I determine with such like specificity and exactness? How could I make a call like that? I think there is like a legitimate grievance to hold against the concept that you actually can. And I think you're also sort of turning in, sort of like making it more of a science. I mean, I am the objective music report here. I do think I have the objectively correct opinions of music, but I don't really think music at the end of the day is a science. You know, I use more just like my major, like, godly abilities in reviewing music. Again, entirely unironic. You know, no sarcasm coming from me right now. I use my incredible abilities to determine what the objectively correct scores are. But I mean, it's not like a scientific process. And how I'm going to go by evaluating. It's not like I'm plugging a machine into my brain, and then that machine is telling me, oh, I got 6.3 points worth of pleasure from listening to that record. I think it's a dumb way to view music and art in general, I guess. But then again, I do use numbers in my review scores, or I do use numerical scores in my reviews. So I mean, why do I use them? I mean, obviously people can have their different grievances, and I think I listed some grievances just barely, but I mean, why do I go on the other side after I offered such blazing critiques? Well, ultimately, I think there is a major convenience in grading with a number. So like when I see that when someone says that Anthony Fantano gave My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy a 6 out of 10, I immediately understand from just that sentence that he is a ridiculously stupid person and that he knows nothing about music in general. Sorry, just kidding. I mean, I can't show too much respect for Anthony Fantano because he isn't objectively correct, unlike me. But yeah, that was tongue in cheek, you know, hilarious. But I think there is a convenience in saying I immediately understand that like he thinks it's a very overrated album, that it's more of like a mediocre product for him. There's just an instant communicability and there's ability to compare. Like, so I can look at Pitchfork gave a 10 out of 10 to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and Anthony Fantano gave a 6 out of 10. Like, there's an instant ability to look at, oh, these two people gave completely different scores. Or maybe Anthony Fantano gave, I can't remember what he's given other Kanye albums. He gave The Life of Pablo, I think he gave a 6, then he changed it to an 8. So, yeah, that example. He went from a 6 to an 8. You see immediately that in his mind that album has improved like by a substantial leap. And I think there's like a value in being able to compare through that sense. I mean, obviously it can get to the point where it's like, oh, I'm giving this my score here. I'm so pretentious. I only have 3 albums I gave a 10 out of 10 to. I'm such a cool guy. But I mean, I think there is a value at the end of the day of still giving like numerical scores. And I think it sort of acts as like a spark notes for the review. Like I can instantly get a summary in like 5 seconds. Like if I don't want to watch the entire Anthony Fantano video, and I mean, who does? I can just immediately scroll down to the description, and that was again another little tongue-in-cheek joke. Sometimes I watch the entire review, but I mean, I can instantly scroll down, look at the description, 7 out of 10. Okay, I'm done. I don't care. But I get what he's saying in the video. Blah blah blah. But I think that's kind of an essential thing to have in the 21st century with music criticism. And I feel like I think it's kind of wrong to think of a number as like, oh, like it's like a 6.7. That means it's 2/3 as good of a 10 out of 10. I don't think it works like that. I think it works more like I think it works more as like a category. I'm just giving it a more specific category to think it. So I can have a category in my mind of what a B album looks like. You know, think of maybe not as like a pretty good to great showing from an artist, but obviously not up there as like one of the best ever. Like a B, like I can construct an image of what that looks like in my mind. And, you know, maybe if I give an 8.8, you know, I'm just thinking B in terms of like the average, you know, high school grading scale in the U.S. I don't know what it looks like in other countries, but like an 8.8 would be like like a B+. So I mean, giving it that higher of a score can give it like a further exactness, And I have like an idea in my head, of what an A album might look like, and so maybe that would be like a 9.4, and a numerical scale a 9.5, and so maybe an album that's like missing that, doesn't meet that mark would be like a 9.1, 9.2, blah blah blah. And so I think that's the value that you get in using numerical scores, is that it gives you like a more exactness. I mean, I know some people who use 9.5, 9.0, 8.5, 8.0. They don't use any in between. I use it sometimes in the higher scales. I think it gets pretty arbitrary once you get to like lower scales. I mean, if I get a D on an assignment versus a C- on an assignment, like I think there's less of a distinction at that point. Like you're pathetic either way. Your parents are kicking you out. But I think once you get to the lower scores, it's like harder to determine. That's why I don't use, at least at this point, I am not using like 6.4, 6.3s, just because once it's in like the lower registers, like it's harder to tell apart, from everything else. I think I have less of a good idea of what like a C tier or a D tier or like what an F tier. I mean, I know what an F tier looks like, but I think the lower points, it's harder to tell what you're really talking about, Now, the format. Include a little joke image here of Family Guy funniest moments, but that is the Swans album, if you don't recognize it. Not To Be Kind. Soundtracks for the Blind. And that's kind of getting into my idea of what medium, video, text, or audio, do you want to communicate your review in. So I think video and audio, you get an advantage in the terms that you're able to communicate in the same medium as the actual music that you're using. Sadly, you can't do that most of the time on YouTube because of copyright. You can't use very much music. But I think there is maybe an added value. Maybe you can sample like a sound or whatever, or play a few seconds to tell, like, oh, that was this song, blah, 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 instead of having to, like, communicate that all via words. But I think at the end of the day, like, whether you use video, whether you use text, whether you use audio, I don't think that's, like, a meaningful. But I think your ideas are what really matters, and maybe presentation is severely better in one medium versus another for how you're giving the review. And maybe, like, visual aids or using the blunt language of just pure text is how you want to tell your review. But I don't think it's like getting at the underlying point. I think what's more important is like how you're analyzing, how you're looking at the actual album. And I think how far you're analyzing versus just describing, and how far you're describing what you feel about it versus like how deep you're looking at the actual art. So I think the further you analyze an album, the further the analysis goes, the less value the video or the text review or whatever has to someone who's never listened to the album before. So if I think of it in terms of, if I'm trying to describe the hero's journey in like Star Wars, for instance, and I'm trying to describe this to someone who's never seen Star Wars before, obviously the further I go in analyzing, how the plot points tie into that theory, like the more I'm going to lose them. And I think it kind of gets to the point where it's the point of a review to teach people like what album they want to listen to, what albums they should listen to. Well, if that's the case, then why analyze the album super deeply so they don't understand what you're saying? I think it also gets into the idea of like music spoilers. I think is a big of a deal, obviously, as in TV. I mean, I can't really think of any like on the top of my head, but I mean, there's like an idea to think about like there are more narrative concept albums. Maybe you don't want to spoil what happens there. Maybe you can't analyze if you're not spoiling it. Something to keep in mind. But I think the further you analyze, I think also the less people are going to be interested. Like, I don't think most people have an interest in, for instance, watching a 30-minute long video on how to do a record review. I think that's going to lose most people. I think it's also the case if you're just doing a 2-hour long video on how the chord progressions in, I don't know, like this random ass country album, you're obviously going to lose more people. And I think also there's, by that same token, to an extent, do you want your analysis of what you're saying, do you want it to give the same messages as the album, or as the, like, so do you want it, like, if there's a political message behind a record, let's say you like think it's a positive political message or whatever, do you want the way, like, let's say like you have an album that's like a Rage Against the Machine album, do you want to like present your review of that, do you present that through like the same paradigm in terms of like, do you want to focus on the political aspects of that music as opposed to like the sonic aspects, if that makes sense? Do you want to like touch on like the messages being said, or do you want to touch on just what you think of it personally? Like I think there are like something, I don't know if that made much sense. I think there's also a question there of what do you want to do in that regard. And I think you also get to the point where, just producing high quality videos, you lose the ability. Like if I wanted to like do a lot of research, or if I want to analyze something super deeply and make like a 6-hour long video on it, like I lose the ability to talk about any album that's came out in the last, week. Like I can't like review an album the week it comes out if I want to do an hour long review, or I can't talk about a newest music news development. I can't talk about Astroworld if at least in a contemporary sense, I can't talk about Astroworld if I spend 6 hours, interviewing, like spend like 60 days interviewing people to make like a 6-hour long full comprehensive documentary. I'm sure people would still watch that, but that's not going to be a contemporary. It's not going to be right on the nose when it comes out. And maybe you want to present your opinion. Maybe you want to be like, oh, I knew this was a cult classic to begin with, or oh, I had the most biting coverage in this blah blah blah. So I think that's also something to consider when you want to look at like how far do I want to go when I make this video. I mean, if you just like go hard, like if you like dedicate your entire life, maybe you can make super long, deep analysis videos of a record the week it comes out. But that's it. I think that's something you have to consider. Now, it's the most important question. What do you review? So, it's this meme here. I don't know if you've heard. This might be the most underground joke I've made. This is a 1,500 word review of the Emily Montes album, which is like a 6-minute long album made by a 5-year-old. I mean, obviously, I don't think she made the instrumentals, but she sings most of the songs and raps the lyrics. 1,500 word review of that. So, I mean, obviously, I haven't reviewed the Emily Montes album. But, maybe the joke is that they spent, all this time. I think it was like super long article reviewing this album made by a kid. So maybe that's not how you want to spend, maybe that is how you want to spend your time. Newer albums, they get more views, and they're just more valuable in terms of highlighting records that people should buy. So if if a brand new album comes out and someone's like, oh, should I listen to it? Or blah, blah. Maybe I want to buy it on vinyl, blah. Your review wants to come out, sooner rather than later, so you can be like, yeah, buy it now. I mean, obviously, 99% of the music that comes out is not coming out, right now, right? Isn't coming out, within the last week. But I mean, if you're looking at like this newest release, maybe it's not available to listen to on streaming services, or maybe you just don't want to spend your time listening to it unless you know it's going to be good. I think you lose an ability to comment on it immediately if you're reviewing it like a year later, or maybe like oh, I already knew this was a great album, it's been out for 15 years, blah blah blah. Like I didn't need to hear your opinion on it to know it was good. I think that is an issue you run into if you want to review a newer album. I think at the same time, I think reviewing an older album, allows you for more time to like digest the actual record. You get more insight. So like for instance, I don't think a contemporary review of Whole Lotta Red is going to have as much value. Like if someone reviewed Whole Lotta Red the day after it came out, I think the review is going to be much, much, much worse than someone who like would review it today. And spoiler alert, I am going to be reviewing Whole Lotta Red, I believe, but soon. But I think if you review an older album, it gives you more time to digest it, more time to look at it historically, and more like ability to look at it in like a deeper sense. So I do think that the older reviews, I mean, they have their own benefits, but I think older reviews are generally better, and I think they're more often going to be. So I think an older review you're going to be able to sift it, so you're not going to be talking about this normal. You're not going to talk about mediocre or boring records as much. You're gonna be talking about like the more interesting, maybe horrifyingly bad or horrifyingly good. You're going to be able to talk about the more interesting records that like have actually had some impact, stood the test of time, to be worth talking about. And I think that you're able to do more like deeper research. You're able to look at it deeper. You're able to reflect on it more. You're able to think like, oh, maybe that didn't age as well, or maybe that aged really well, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's also easier to craft like a narrative. So I think you can say like, I can talk about the history of this artist, or I can talk about how it ties into their career, or how it does blah, blah, blah. I think it's way easier to do once like the dust has settled and you're reviewing it from a position of confidence like that. And I think it's more I think it's important to have like a narrative like that to keep your review interesting, to keep people entertained. Of course, I'm an expert on how to keep people entertained. I'm sure the viewership statistics are off the roof. However far we into this video right now. I think length can be hard to look at in terms of how you review an album. I think length gets difficult to look at the more you review a record. So, right now this video is way too long, you know. For instance, people have no reason to keep watching the video after a while because of just sheer boredom. It's a simple fact of modern life that technology has essentially rewired our brains and made it impossible to live like a normal human. Technology is no longer supplemental to life, but has overtaken life, and it itself has become the purpose. People come home from work so they can spend hours on their phone or watching television. The seasoning has become the entire meal. People work aimlessly for further vanity in a hopeless attempt to find meaning in a depreciating world. The death of a foundational God's content wrestled away any need for hope. It's not that God was ever real, but the illusion kept life intact. It helped to distract from the horror of our inevitable deaths. Death has finally won to an extent. There's no way to hide the ultimate end condition of all of our lives. Ultimately, our existence is conditional, and there'll be a final moment to our consciousness that will ever extinguish our ability to live meaningful lives. Right now you're watching a pointless video while you progress closer to your inevitable grave. In actuality, maybe technology is the new God, the new distraction from the all-encompassing end that we will all eventually meet. There's no way we can escape this fact. Maybe this video will distract you so you don't realize it.